How's it going, guys? I'm Shifty Cow, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Battlefield 2016. So before we get into it, if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, be sure to smack that like button and subscribe if you're not already. But anyways, guys, let's hop right into it. So what do we actually know about Battlefield 2016? Well, first of all, there's very limited solid information that's come out of EA or DICE, solely because they're trying to keep this a secret until they get a lot closer to the release date, which is supposed to be in Q4 of 2016, and they really just are trying to keep a lot of it to themselves, that way they can hype it up a lot more when it's much closer to release. So we do know a couple of things from EA press releases to some developer tweets from DICE Stockholm, but for the most part it's pretty much secretive and we kind of have to take a lot of guesses based on decisions they've made in the past and also just previous Battlefield titles. The biggest question I've heard talked about over Battlefield 2016 is when the setting is actually going to take place. A lot of people are talking about having it be a World War I or World War II title, and while I do think this would be really cool having a high quality AAA game that's, you know, World War I, World War II, you have trench warfare and all those awesome things, I just can't see EA wanting to have this because it's kind of a risk, especially after Hardline. They don't want to be losing money on potential projects, so I really think they're not going to go with this, at least for a main Battlefield title, and instead that's going to be a game for an off year, similar to how Hardline was for Battlefield 4. So another thing I've heard is either Vietnam or even something like a future game like Battlefield 2142, and while there's definitely a large population of people who would be interested in playing these games, I still think EA is probably going to go for a somewhat modern warfare type of game style, just because they don't want to take any risks and they're just going to save those types of titles for off years or spin-off games. So with that out of the way, it's going to be safe to assume that it's probably going to be very similar to Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, but they might make a couple of changes in terms of how technology has progressed, and it might be something that's slightly in the future, similar to, I don't know, Black Ops 2. That was something that was pretty modern, but also had a couple of things that were a bit more futuristic. So I think it might be something like that, where it has a couple of gadgets or guns that aren't really used today, or they're either in development today, and then there's of course going to be the standard tanks, aircraft, helicopters, because they're not going to want to get rid of that and spoil the Battlefield formula. Now, the next part of this video is pretty much entirely speculation, just because there's not a lot to talk about in terms of what are they going to change for Battlefield 2016 that's going to pull people from Battlefield 4, Hardline 3, even Bad Company 2, and make them want to play this new game. So first of all, we're just going to assume that it has a smooth or somewhat smooth launch. There's not too many errors, there's not too much netcode problems like there was with Battlefield 4, and we're just going to hope that they learn their lesson with that game and they have a relatively smooth start, which truly I believe they're going to be able to do just because of how successful Battlefront was. That was a very well polished game, and despite its lack of content, I think they showed that they could really put out a polished game, and we're really just going to have to guess on what they're going to do special with Battlefield 2016 that makes people pulled in. So personally, I think it's going to be destruction. They had this for Battlefield 4 in terms of Levolution, and that was a really big selling point. You could just topple skyscrapers, you could flood an entire city area, and even if it feels kind of gimmicky or doesn't add anything to the gameplay, I can still see them trying to add in more Levolution, solely because it brings in a lot of new customers, because people are a lot more interested in trailers if they have explosions and just buildings being toppled, jets exploding, all that type of stuff, and also it's kind of something that just adds to the overall Battlefield atmosphere. There's a lot of explosions, there's just insane amounts of destruction, and even if they're set pieces, it's still something that kind of adds to the game. So I really hope they take kind of a new direction with Levolution, and rather than having it be like one set piece that goes off and then it's over, I'd rather have them put their time into medium to smaller scale destruction Levolution events. So rather than having something that's just massive and everyone notices, which can be really cool, and I can't lie, you know, the Siege Tower still looks really awesome, I would much rather have, you know, smaller little things that collapse and just look really nice, or even just like custom destruction to where it doesn't feel like it's the same explosion over and over and over again, and instead it starts to kind of look different, and there's so many different animations or ways things can topple that it just kind of feels like a much more, I don't know, unique and immersive area. So that's just kind of what I think, but it's pretty safe to say that no matter which direction they decide to take with the next Battlefield's Levolution, whether it's just none at all and it's focused extremely on small destruction, or if there's just a giant set piece that goes down on every match like we have in Battlefield 4, it's going to be pretty awesome, and we're just going to have to wait and see. So the last thing I wanted to talk about in this video is content, because there's been a lot of games over the past year or so that have come out and people have really heavily criticized them for not having enough content, whether it's guns, maps, gadgets, customization, things like that really add to the overall life of a game. And for certain games in the past, that has been the reason that they have failed. They've just not had enough content. People have felt like they've experienced all there is to experience within the first couple of hours, solely because there's just not enough to unlock, not enough to play, or some games get divided up into a paywall and then you end up with premium and not premium members like Battlefield 4, and there's just not quite enough people playing in the community to actually get servers running. So that's kind of a worst case scenario, and it did happen with Battlefield Hardline, but I really don't think this is a big concern for me personally, and I don't think it should be for you guys, because they have been really good about putting just insane amounts of weapons and just really nice maps. Usually I'm expecting about 10 maps with the base game. That's pretty standard for most games, and then we're probably going to see a similar premium system like we did with Battlefield 4, to where you can get more map packs. I would really be happy if they kind of just went away with that system and found other ways to fund their DLCs, but instead it's probably going to be something like this, just because they've been so successful at earning profits this way. But anyways guys, that's what I think about Battlefield 2016. Those are just kind of my predictions and just some news that we've kind of heard over the past couple of months. So if you guys did enjoy the video, like I said before, be sure to leave a like down below. And if you have any comments on what you think Battlefield 2016 is going to be like, do you think it's going to be World War I, the future? Do you think it's just going to say like Battlefield 4 has? But if you guys have any comments, leave those down in the comments section. Subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time guys, stay buttery.